guys for joining me. So I am Sally Sloley. I'm an Agile coach currently working out of Sydney. Been here in Australia for a couple of years now, worked out of Canberra and then Sydney. And before that, I spent most of my time in Seattle working for Microsoft. Oh, I did not do the original one. So not too long ago, I was complaining about work, how grown-ups want to pay experts to come in and be an Agile coach and then not listen to a word that we say. And when I was explaining a couple of the things that they don't listen to while cooking dinner with my oldest kid, they looked at me and said, you know what, this sounds like the same lessons that people have to learn in MasterChef. And they were like, you really should take a look at this and see what happens. And sure enough, the more I thought about it, the more I realized I can use this to explain in another way that they understand. Because at least 2 of the people I've worked for have actually accused me of just trying to money grub, of actually just trying to take their money when I should be giving them a playlist and a checkbook that'll teach them how to do what I do all on their own. And so I came up with a couple of ways to explain how it's not really going to work that way. Quality versus quantity. So often, quality gets skipped. Everybody's so date-driven that they have to get things out by a certain date. You have to get everything out by that certain date. You forget that you're not building a quality product, and it always comes back to bite you. And one of the things that we teach them is to slow down, try to figure out what their real problems are, and solve for those. Always put out the best quality for your customers as you can. Everything else will follow, but building quality is what's going to get people to stick with you. Mystery box versus the recipe. They're always looking for that playbook. They want that list that they can go down. If we do this, 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 and this in order, it's going to work out. But if you've noticed, when they give them recipes in something like MasterChef, they can follow it to the nth degree, but if they don't have the skills to back up the techniques that are required for these recipes, they're not getting it right. They're just going through the motions. They're not getting the flavors and the textures just so. But when they give them a mystery box and they say, okay, you've got all these ingredients, you're now on your own. You don't have to follow the recipe, but you've got to be creative and come up with the best product you can. More often than not, that's exactly what they do. Trendy versus putting in the work. How many people here have had to work in a Spotify environment that's not Spotify? Yeah. They want that thing that's going to be a magic blanket that you throw over them that suddenly makes them agile. They figure if they can change the names to be something that another company had work for them, or if you bring them safe because scaling worked for another company, it's going to work magic. But if you're with a company that still thinks agility is what happens when you give people hot desks, nothing that you give them is going to work. It's not going to give them any of the results that they need. It takes hard work to learn those fundamentals. Rockstar versus teamwork. So many of the companies that I go into are starting up teams, and instead of, following the coach's directions to find teams that can work together well, they go out and they hire rock stars. They want someone with all the skills in this one particular type of development that only works this way, that can hit the ground running. What ends up happening more often than not is that these people can only work in that one direction. They have no interest in being in a team, and they never find this out. They never ask quite the right questions. And so then you end up with, say, a developer who's either taking all the best work before anybody else can get to it because, they're the ones that have the skills to do it. Nobody else is as good as they are. Or they come in and sit back and don't take any of the work because they feel that the work on the project is beneath them. In the kitchen, when these guys are doing teamwork challenges, more often than not, there's someone there who's not up to the standards of everyone else. And that's okay, because if you look at something like MasterChef Junior, those kids always help each other first. They don't think about me, what's my part in the project, how am I going to get, the accolades for this. It's, we've got to work together, let's make this happen. And they're constantly helping their little friends. And they end up doing better than the adults in a lot of cases. Whereas the adults, you'll have the one person stepping back going, well, you're not doing it up to my standards, you're not good enough. It's the same thing on a team. You've got to work together, and what they don't understand is without a coach there to see these things and to help guide them, you just end up with a team that's dysfunctional. Failure versus not safe to fail. We always talk about being safe to fail, and that scares managers to death because they don't want you failing. They want you rocking it 24/7 every single day. Never happens. Even the best chefs in the world screw up. And on some of these cooking shows, they fail over and over. But the lesson for them is, yeah, sometimes it means they're going to get kicked off the show. But a lot of them will fail and then have to go into something like an elimination challenge. Well, all that is another chance to hone their skills and get better and learn from someone else. And so they find that by the end, the ones who've grown the most are actually the ones that have failed the most. And it's okay, because as long as you're learning from your mistakes and not making the same ones over and over again, you're going to end up better in the long run. And coaches are there to help make that environment safe. And if they're there as a buffer, you're going to end up with much better teams in the long run. Marathon versus playbook. One of the biggest reasons why transformations fail is because managers want instant results. They want everything to work out, within the first couple of weeks, and they don't realize it can take years. But if they get there, they've got a company that can weather any type of storm. It really doesn't matter. In the cooking shows, these guys start out, especially MasterChef Australia, these guys go for months. They've got to have the stamina to do whatever's thrown at them, to learn on the go, to work together, to keep going no matter how they're feeling or how homesick they are. And it's the same with teams. They're going to get discouraged. Things aren't always going to go to plan. Things aren't going to work out the way that they want. And that's okay, because with a coach's help, you've got somebody backing you. You've got somebody reminding you that to be in it for the long haul is going to help you. Established company versus startup. I've worked with a lot of bigger companies, and pretty often they end up failing, and that's okay. But what they're missing is the fact that it doesn't matter how old or established you are. It doesn't matter if you're a brand new startup. Yeah, if you're a brand new startup, you can just walk in, learn all the new things that you have to learn, and get going. An older company is going to have to drop a lot of what they know and let go and learn some new procedures, some new processes, and really figure out where the next steps can take them. Just like with the cooking shows, they start out, some of them are really young, and they're thinking, oh, they're young, they're nimble. But that doesn't always help because they don't have those foundational skills to back themselves up. Some of the older companies, just like the older contestants, have a whole wealth of knowledge, but a lot of times it's not the right knowledge for the right time. Doesn't matter, but if you've got a good enough coach backing you, you can get through anything. Giving up versus trying again. Again, these cooking shows, people make extreme mistakes. They put flavor profiles together that should never be put together. They try new, crazy, out-of-the-box things. But at least in the cooking shows, they're allowed to fail. Yeah, they might go home. It's true, they might. But they're going to learn from it. In work, nobody wants you to fail. Nobody wants to see that. Nobody wants to say, my entire team failed on this project. But if we can help make them understand that it's actually okay, the teams will be better. Mise en place versus chaos. Having everything you need ready to go and in one place is something that's huge in kitchens. You've got to have a proper working space. You've got to have the tools that you need to get the job done. You need them handy. You need your teammates around you. They forget this in the workplace. They forget that working together, having all of your people in one place, having the tools set up that they need is all part of the process to get the work done. How many times have you been in a workplace where the computer systems are so old it takes you weeks to get anything out the door, or you're having to communicate with overseas teams and you don't even have a way to communicate with them because the technology's too old? It's all those little things that you have to put in place. Fun versus deadline driven. Work can be fun. Work should be fun. Work should be at least semi-enjoyable, if not, really enjoyable. So often when I go in and try to interject a little fun and get the teams to, maybe take a break on a Friday and get together and just talk and get to know each other, managers immediately look at you like, well, no, they have to get to work. You can't do that. That's for your own time. Do that on the weekends. What they never get is that when teams work better together, they stop thinking about just themselves. They start thinking about each other. And when they can all start thinking about each other, then they start thinking about the customer and the company, and they give it their all. Same with these guys. When they're in these cooking competitions, sometimes they forget that. And they're just so driven, and they're so driven to, meet the deadline and get the food out that they forget, and they're yelling at each other. And it takes those coaches and mentors to come back in and say, you know what? You're in this together. Why are you here? Get back to your basics and move forward. Succeeding versus giving up. Where was I going with that one? A lot of times we try to copy what other people have done. They hop on and they try to make a recipe that looks like someone else's. You'll see the big mentor chefs bring them these recipes and say, yeah, go make this big, beautiful, elaborate thing. They have to be stopped from giving up, because halfway through they tend to get incredibly overwhelmed. They forget that they're in a challenge, that they don't actually have to finish this thing. But in teams, you've got to be there to help remind them that it's not about the perfection, it's about the pursuit of it. And if they keep going, they will eventually win. Coaching versus going alone. These guys come into these shows as home cooks. A lot of them have some pretty good skills. A lot of them have practiced a lot at home. Some have even worked in restaurants before. But the fact is, they don't have that substantial knowledge that a master chef would have. And when they come in and try to go it alone, they get really arrogant, they make mistakes, they blame everybody but themselves for them. And this will happen in teams too. You'll start seeing the blame game happening. But if you have a coach, just like they do with their mentors, to come in and talk you through getting you back to, why are you here? What's your end goal? What is it that motivated you to come to work today? What is it that motivates them to get up and go on these shows and cook every day? It's all about bringing you back to what your basics are. And you can't do that without a coach. Without a coach, these teams will just eventually devolve into just doing the work. Flexibility versus rigidity. You've got to be flexible. Technology changes constantly. Tools change constantly. Business motivations change. If you get too involved in being your work, you're not going to be flexible enough to move on. It happens in these shows a lot when they come in and, I'm a vegetarian, or I'm a baker and I don't do savory, or I only do savory and I don't bake. What they realize halfway through the show is, you've got to have a little of each. You've got to find that balance, and that's what we try to do with teams. We don't want devs to be testers and testers to be devs, but we want them to have enough knowledge about what the others do so that they can help pick up the pieces when things go wrong, when someone's suddenly sick on the last day of the sprint and you need to get the work done. It's all about being flexible enough to pick up and help the rest of the team get where they need to be. And in conclusion, going it alone is fine, but having a coach there means that you're not just getting the recipe booklet. You're actually getting years and years of experience of seeing what's gone wrong in other companies, what's happened, what's succeeded, what's made them fail, and what they've done to get where they needed to be. And by you being there to help them, you can help keep everyone on track and stave off a lot of problems. And that's it. Thanks. Questions, comments?
I imagine a good Scrum Master would be thinking about a lot of this stuff like any Agile coach, right?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. That's the whole point of having them on the team, is to watch and see what they do and how they interact, how management interacts with them, being able to spot problems before they happen for the team. it's kind of what we do. The teams aren't going to know that these signs are out there that means management's about to fall apart and start changing things. But yeah, we've seen it, we've done it, and as Scrum Masters or as coaches, we're there to help, share the experiences that we've had so they can make a better decision for how they want to move forward.
So from that perspective, it's kind of like an anti-patterns presentation, right?
Yeah.
What things to look out for.
Exactly. Yeah.
So from the leadership or board perspective, right, the business case has been improved, you have been given money, Agile team started working.
Yeah.
And how you sell them this idea of failure that, look, if we are not generating any value initially, it will come, but we'll go into that failure and we need to create that environment.
Yeah, again, going back to MasterChef, when these teams get out there, they're likely to fail. They don't have the skills that they need. And so talking to management, they've got to understand that you have to give teams time, that you're not going to realize the value immediately. The other thing that you have to remind management of is that there aren't milestones that you get to that they can really see, which is another reason to have the coaches, because in our minds there are milestones. There are things that we see when teams start working together, when teams start pushing back, when they start inspecting what they've done, figuring out where their problems were, come up with new things to try to get better. We know that those teams are improving. And what management has to understand is that they need to become really close friends with the coaches and get that kind of reporting, not the on-paper Gantt chart nonsense reporting, but how do the teams feel? How are they thinking? How are they reacting? Are they getting incrementally better? And if they can trust us to tell them that, then we can quit worrying about doing silly charts and graphs and actually get them to understand where the team's mindsets are, where they might need additional training or additional investment. It's probably the hardest thing to do, though. You've almost got to have management either having a coach of their own and really being invested in listening, or you've got to have someone who's worked in an Agile environment before and gets it, and then they're like, yeah, I get it, I need to step back and let you do your thing, and trust that we'll come to them if there are problems.
It's also time frames that you will be engaged for as an Agile coach.
Sort of depends. Sort of depends. The ones that try harder, years or more. The ones that really don't, a couple of months at a time. I've seen places where, yeah, absolutely. I've gone in and spent a couple of weeks looking at the entire business, looking at what kind of strategies they want to put in place, and I'll build an assessment, which is basically, here's the things that you're doing that are good, keep going. Here are the things that you need improvement on, prioritize it for them. Here are the things you're going to need to invest in to get where you want to go. And a lot of times, that's the end of my gig. Because when they suddenly realize how much work it is, and that it's not going to be the story they can tell their CIOs at the end of the month, hey, we're rocking it, then they kind of back off and go, no, we don't want to do this. So yeah, it takes a special kind of person, but it can take years. I've seen companies turn around pretty quickly and really put that investment in, get their whole companies trained in Agile, get everybody going to meetups and learning new things and trying, and those are the ones that succeed. A lot of the ones that are in it just half-assed don't really work. What's that? Not so good. Not so good. They, unfortunately, it looked at the beginning, at least one of the big groups that I was with, I was actually one of the people on the ground doing the Scrum training, a couple of days training at a time, and then I set up some places where people could come and talk and do kind of lean coffee style learnings. I got the Scrum Masters and the POs talking to each other. They had zero leadership buy-in. And so what happened is all these teams learned how to push back and learned how to critically look at what their issues were and how to bring, possible solutions to their managers going, hey, we're seeing these problems. This is stopping us from doing our best work. What out of these 4 things can we do? and immediately got shut down. And then they were coming back to me going, but you said when we pushed back they were gonna be invested and do the things, and they weren't. And so yeah, it became a couple of months of some really good stuff happening, and then it just dropped off again. No. No, there are some good places happening. There is some good Agile happening, but more often than not, the upper management level is still doing business as usual, and so they're not funding properly. They're not backing the teams. They still come into a team that's getting fully established and finally working really well together. They start trying to invest in their platforms so people can actually do some continuous integration and continuous delivery. But then they go, oh yeah, it's the end of fiscal year. We totally forgot we have to build that investor website. You guys stop what you're doing. You've got 4 weeks to go build this big, huge thing that we don't really know what we even want, but make it happen. And then the teams are disgruntled and they fall apart. There's a lot of moving people, you know, oh, hey, this is now the priority project, so we're going to pick all the best people off the teams and put them here, and then everybody else just go do your thing. So, yeah, they're trying. There was one group over there, I can't remember who they were. They were doing the exact same thing that we were, another big, huge, multi-million-dollar transformation. I haven't heard how theirs went, though. But, yeah, at the end of the day, they're a big, old boy company who still wants to do things the old way but wants to be nimble. They just don't want to put in the work for it, and so.
So then for a company like that, like what should Agile mean for a company like that? What are the benefits that they get from that?
Well, so for example, one of the teams that I was with at the very beginning of my year there, we did have permission to do what was necessary. So we spent a couple of weeks actually hanging out at the airport, talking to customers. There was an entire group of people who were there just to find customer pain points. And what they found were a whole lot of little things that could make the customers really happy, but they weren't money makers. They were just things that were going to make them happy. But they were easy to do. They weren't real expensive. They didn't take very long. And we were actually given permission to do this. And the customers got happier. They were getting good feedback from the stuff that we did. So, for example, a lot of people fly in and out of Sydney during the school holidays, and they don't know that. They don't know that it's school holidays and the lines are expected to be 2 to 3 times as long. So they started sending out SMS messages to people. Hey, by the way, you're going to be flying through here when all the kids are off and all the families are traveling. Take some extra time. And it helped them. And it was just those little tiny things that weren't money makers. And so that was the kind of stuff we were trying to show them. It's not always about what's going to make you the most profit. It's what's going to give you the best customer feedback to then allow you to go and do the big bang stuff. And when it started, it was getting real easy. They were like, oh yeah, we can see this now. This is kind of cool. But then budgets come along and it's, oh yeah, no, we can't do those things anymore. And the next thing you know, the team was disbanded and nobody was allowed to do anything that wasn't fully funded at the beginning. So all those little cool projects just dropped off.
Get your time there, Sally.
Huh?
Get your time.
Oh, I did. Aw. Thank you, guys.